take questions for Katie and Chris Woodward.
All right, John. Thanks. Thanks everybody for jumping on here. 2020 was unprecedented season in a lot of ways. To state the obvious, when you're in position to have the number 2 pick in the country in the draft, it's not a successful year. We had injuries, we had some poor performances, but ultimately, I'm responsible for that. And honestly, I apologize to our fans for some of the rough stretches that they watched. I do want to address some of the areas that I feel we did really well in this year. First off, on a much bigger topic, broader scale, I'm really proud how we handled some pretty difficult issues. The whole baseball operations group did some really good work throughout the shutdown. They treated our people as family. They communicated with transparency, respect through some pretty challenging decisions. There's a lot of outstanding work done in every area, on field, big leagues, minor leagues, scouting, development, R&D, things that are going to, behind the scenes, pay dividends over the course of time. And quite frankly, a lot of people did this while working at reduced salaries, and I can't tell you how much respect I have for them. I want to applaud the efforts of our medical team, our operations team, for preparing for the season. I'm really preparing for it twice, but once was the second time around was unlike anything we'd ever dealt with before. The COVID precautions, taking care of those people that tested positive and protecting the rest so that they didn't, not letting it become an excuse or a distraction for us. And many of the challenges we were presented with, never went public, and that was largely because of their efforts to keep things tight. Really proud of our groups that ran the Surprise Complex and the alternate site here across the street. Players' well-being and development came first, and many of those guys advanced further than we would have thought because of the efforts of those staffs. Our farm system, I think, showed that it's better than it's probably been given credit for. A number of the young guys that were kind of moved up and pushed into service at the major league level performed really well. They handled themselves really well, and I believe that there's a lot more talent there that is going to be on display here in Instruction League and on display in 2021, and gives us a lot of hope. I'm excited about the draft class we brought in. I know it didn't pass some of the analysts' tests, but I believe in time other people are going to feel the same way that I do and that we do. And I want to recognize Woody and his staff. There were some trying periods, but you learn a lot about people in tougher times, and I think sometimes you do in good times. And I'm more confident now than I ever have been that that Chris is part of the solution here, and he's going to be our manager when on the first Tuesday after the season, he's doing a press conference talking about a postseason series and not an end of season presser. And ultimately, this year is going to be marked by us really leaning into a youth movement. I think everything we do moving forward is going to revolve around that. The mindset of our coaches, the focus on their development, really taking nothing for granted with this group of players. Our winter additions are going to look to fit into the roster that we're putting together, but also look to fit into the kind of development-minded culture that we're going to need to have. We're going to put the club together to take advantage of what we feel are our strengths. We still haven't had all of our meetings yet, so some of the specifics are TBD. But we've got an athletic, really defensively talented group. I think we got a chance to be one of the better defensive teams in the game. We've got guys that want to learn, that want to run the bases, that aren't afraid. We play in a bigger park. I think we can build a roster accordingly as we develop these bats, and and all these things should really help our pitchers here. And ultimately, the better that we are at it, the more consistent, the more we push and stay focused on developing these players, the quicker we're going to see results. So that's going to be 100% of our focus up and down throughout the organization. On you, John.
Okay, so we'll start taking questions, so please raise your hands. We'll go to, let's see. Okay, TR, you're up.
John, What is your number one priority this offseason as far as improving this team? Chris has said offense. What is your feeling?
Yeah, again, we haven't really had our meetings yet to where I'm going to sit here and prioritize everything. I think that a lot of the improvements offensively are, we have more talent on this team than we had production, and we're not going to hit the way we did this year. We can't. So, just about every player on the roster is capable of more offensively than they showed this year. So that I think we are going to get better. That is going to be a priority. But a lot of it's going to be looking at which of these young players we feel are ready for the challenge next year. Those that are, we're going to provide opportunities to compete for jobs. Those that we're not sure that are ready, we may bring in somebody ahead of them, but we're going to be looking for some versatility and flexibility there, so that when these young guys are ready, we have the opportunity to get them that experience. I think that they're. Depending upon exactly how we go, we could look to add some, another starter, so that we're able to pitch the younger pitchers when we want to and when they're ready for it, and not necessarily force them into duty before then.
Does Joey Gallo need help from outside the organization as far as big bats?
I'm not sure I follow that question.
Does Joey Gallo need more guys around him, give him support, offensive support, where he doesn't feel like he's the only power hitting slugger on this team?
Listen, I thought Joey had an outstanding year defensively, and offensively he's with a lot of our other players that are capable of a lot more than we saw.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Evan Grant, you're up.
For both of you guys, I knowing what you just said, John, and knowing where this team is, I'm wondering if you can, in general terms, kind of lay out what in your mind would constitute a roadmap for success for this team in 21, because I think in a lot of ways it's going to be judged in kind of a non-traditional manner.
Yeah, I kind of touched on this. I don't want to. We're not going to. We're not going to get away from evaluating on at the end of the day on wins and losses. That is still the name of the game, and we want our players to grow in a winning environment. We want them to value what it feels like to win, to not forget what it feels like to lose. So, yes, there are some other things that in the short term are going to be, bigger priorities from a standpoint of development, but we never want our players kind of lose that mindset. And so I think by pushing their development, by getting better in these areas, by getting some of these younger players to establish themselves as contributing regulars versus just guys there that are kind of competing for spots, that's going to lead to wins. So it's not necessarily an either or. But what I just said is probably the single biggest one is we're going to need a number of these players to establish themselves, capable of playing, winning baseball up here on a consistent basis, to really know that we have a kind of a foundation that we can begin adding to externally, and so that's probably the single biggest thing I think next year is we need these players to establish themselves. We've got to put them in position to do just that, so that we're it's not a perennial competition, that these guys are here and kind of put a little bit of a foothold, and we know what we have to build off of.
Woody, from a field view, is there a way you could address that a little bit, Tim?
Yeah, I think it's it's really important that these guys develop. I think that they understand what it takes to win, and I think this year was a pretty big learning year. The one thing I mentioned to these guys, especially in the last week, the last day, don't forget what this feels like. Don't forget all these things we talk about, not taking a pitch off, understanding the importance of everything we do and why we do it is going to lead to wins. And, obviously we finished on a good note, which I think in a lot of ways helped to kind of drive that message home, to say, hey, listen, we out-competed them, we out-prepared them, maybe at the end of the day, but obviously we fell short in the season. So, a lot of these younger guys, have an understanding of what it takes and where they fit into a winning model, a winning blueprint. And I think that's the main driver. And obviously when they fall short, we need to hold them accountable and make sure that they understand how to get back to JD's point. How do they become regulars? How do they become regular contributors, regular producers on a daily basis? And I think that's what we're trying to get these guys to understand. And they're young, and they need to understand every day is important, every rep is important. So I think that's kind of when you talk about a roadmap to success, winning success. It's these guys understanding how they do it individually, but also as a group. So we're building them as a group together. They're going to believe in this together. They've obviously dealt with a lot of failure right now as a team, but hopefully that gives them a little bit of understanding as they head into the off season, a little bit of drive, a little bit of hunger to say, hey, listen, we got to do this as a group together, and I'm going to do my part, you do your part, and that's how we build that kind of winning culture. And they understand when they fall short, know why, and when they do it right, they know why.
John, have you? I know you keep ownership abreast of your plans, but have you had an opportunity to kind of fully debrief them on where this club is headed long term, and what is their view on that you could, if there's anything you can share with us?
Yeah, I've had a series of conversations with Ray on it. Really extensive in August as we approached the trade deadline and looked at things that possibilities that were available to us and continued since then. And I think he agrees with the direction, which it's a necessary step. This winter is probably not the time that we're going to go headlong into free agency, but I don't think that's too far off. But to do that, you've got to really have an understanding of the foundation that you're building upon. And the most important thing we can do right now is to establish that and get this group that's either here at the big league level or on the verge of it. To as Woody was saying, to kind of learn the value of all the steps needed to get there. And then I think he understands that. Ray sees that piece of it, and that we can't skip that step, and he's on board for it.
Yes.
Yes, Wilson.
John, since you guys aren't going to be going into free agency headlong, how do you plan to acquire? Do you want to acquire young talent, maybe to supplement the upper levels of the minor leagues, maybe some guys who are in other teams' camps, or do you feel good enough about the system that it will advance to the point where it can support the big league team next year?
A mix of both, Jeff. I mean, listen, we're not in a position to overlook any avenue of talent acquisition. But I feel like our group has done some of our best work in just that market. Whether it's the guys trading for guys like Nick Solak or Colby Allard, who I know struggle, but we believe in as a starting pitcher in this league, or obviously a generation ago, Nelson Cruz, Josh Hamels. I think David Murphy. I think you can acquire players via trade. And that'll be something I think we'll probably be more active in that than at least the very early stages of free agency. We certainly could get involved later on in free agency, but I think it'll be it'll be a little bit later in the off-season calendar.
What where and I know what you said, you haven't dived into things, but are there areas where you can right now say, golly, we're deficient, beside specific positions?
I mean, yeah, but again, we haven't dug through it all. I mean, listen, offensively, there's just about no spot that we were good enough. So, I mean, we have room for improvement across the board there. We haven't yet sat down as a group and really made decisions on, how we're going to prioritize those areas.
we've talked endlessly about second base and shortstop. Are you confident that during the exit interviews that Elvis and Rougned Odor understand where they stand going into this offseason next spring?
I am. Yeah, I think we've had several conversations throughout the year, and again at the end that I think both players understand what we're looking for, and that their spots on the club are not guaranteed.
Thank you.
Kevin, Sherrington?
John, you've always resisted the R word, rebuilding. If you look around at other clubs that are in the playoffs now, they went through extended periods of down years in which they were able to have better positions in the draft and build their systems that way. It makes it a lot easier to do that, although you have to suffer those kinds of losses. Looking back at everything now, do you regret that maybe y'all didn't bottom out a little sooner when it was clear, maybe it was clear we were not going to be contender for a championship?
I think if you look back at in terms of like the types of players that we could have moved at certain points and gotten the types of returns that you'd want, that would really make kind of a meaningful move there. The time where it was discussed and you could have made a case for it really was after 16 before the 17 season, because we had really some really quality players that I think would have from a trade standpoint would have acquired some talent, but we'd also just won back-to-back division titles and been approved for a pretty sizable investment in the ballpark here, and we decided at that point that wasn't the direction we were going to go. I think since then, the players under contract that we had, I think trading them, I don't think it would have really moved the needle enough. Unfortunately, we're, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, we're going to pick second regardless, right? And I think if there's a year to do it, this was not by design. So I'm not, we're not patting ourselves on the back for it. But if there was a year to do it, I'd rather have that pain in a 60-game season than a 162-game season. So the bottom line is that we need to acquire more young talent. We need to develop more young talent, and that's where our focus is now.
Most of those, and I referenced teams that like the Twins, like the Padres, like the Astros, went through 4 or 5 years of really struggling. You referred earlier to say that you don't think you're that far off from pursuing free agents that would put you over the hump. What gives you the idea or the impression at this point that it's not going to be something like that?
Well, I think we're within a year or two of establishing a number of young players at the major league level that we think can play both ways. That by the nature of the economic system in the game are going to be relatively affordable for a number of years, and we're going to have a pretty clean financial picture moving forward. Once it's a little bit hard to say that coming out of the year we have now where revenues are so down, but making a big assumption that we're able to get back to normal operations the next year or two, and with really only 2 contracts on the books, and with the new ballpark, I think we will have the right combination of revenues and an ownership group that is willing to support the club, and a number of young players that we feel in that same time frame are going to establish themselves at the big league level that we could build on.
You referenced the owners a couple of times in Ray Davis and the new ballpark. There have been occasions in the past where owners have gotten a new ballpark and they sat on it for a little while, and then they sell when the selling's good to maximize their revenues. Do you have an assurance? Do you feel like that this ownership is in it for the long haul?
Everything that Ray has shared with me is that's his mindset, but I'm not really in a position to speak on that.
Thanks, John.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go to Levi Weaver.
I just spoke to this a little bit earlier, but I just kind of want to make sure I've got it clear. It's kind of a chicken and the egg question, and you've got the decreased budget for next year, and I got to think that some of that maybe is at least in part due to the fact that there were no tickets sold this year and revenue is down. And then you've got the youth movement. Was it that the youth movement is ready, and this seems to be what you implied earlier, the youth movement's ready, so it's just not time to invest yet, or is the fact that it might not be time to invest influencing, well, in that case, let's go with the youth movement? Does that make sense?
It does. Listen, I think we've effectively sold 0 tickets this year, right? There's no way around that from just a business standpoint, and so it's going to have an impact on the financials of the club. I can't speak to other teams. I know it has a significant impact on the financials of our team, and so it was going to impact next year's overall expenses and budget regardless. But it's that aside, like it's the right thing to do. It's the right move, and we would have advocated for it regardless.
And then I guess just a follow up to an earlier question. You mentioned maybe it would have been time after 2016 to kind of start that rebuild, and you guys came to the decision to wait. The new ballpark on the horizon. Was that? Would you classify that as more of an ownership decision, or something you guys came to together?
I think it was more of a organizational decision when you look at all the factors that are involved, and kind of lay out the different options and pick a path. And so, I haven't spent much time thinking about it since that point. Obviously there's a lot of work to do day to day, and there's certainly value in going back and reviewing decisions to learn going forward, but not to the point maybe where someone in your position does. I think we've got quite enough to do right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Chris, Alec?
Hey guys, thank you very much. How does this club value Joey Gallo right now?
In what way, Chris?
Is he closer to being a franchise player? I mean, just because the year he had in 2019, obviously there was a lot of optimism there, and he obviously struggled offensively this year. Is he the type of player you want to commit to past the control that the club has over him?
Quite possibly. I think with Joey, we've now seen him perform at like these, really top levels in every area of the game. He in the past he's been better offensively. Probably in the past he's been better base running wise, I might say too. This year he might have been the best. He and Mookie Betts were like neck and neck for best defensive outfielder, defensive right fielders in the game. Joe, there's nothing that Joey's not capable of, but ultimately, like the best players in the game do it on a consistent level, day to day, year to year, and that I think is the kind of final piece for Joey to demonstrate. But we know the potential's there. He works as hard as anybody. As we talked about around the trade deadline, we did have some discussions, but we felt like there was still more there, and that we wanted to wait it out. I think our options with Joey, one of which includes extending him, are still very much available to us, and we'll have those conversations. I don't know exactly where that'll go.
A final thing for me, I know you haven't really addressed any positions specifically, but given the options that you have at first base, it seems like this is not the first year we're talking about the position. Are you comfortable with what you have internally to not just address that position next season, but in the years ahead?
Not prepared to say that definitively. No. I give Ronald credit. I think he went when we sent him down. He put some work in. He came back. He was much more productive. He's a clear plus defensive player at the position. He works hard. He has a track record. He's hit right-hand pitching, and so I think he brings some things to the table that that depending upon the rest of the roster, Woody can certainly kind of put him in spots to succeed.
Thank you very much.
Stephen Hawkins.
Hey, John, last offseason, you went and addressed the pitching. You got, you traded for Kluber, you got Jordan and Kyle. But now you're going into this offseason, Minor's gone, Lynn, we know, could end up in trade talks again. And where do you see your rotation, and where do you see as for Kluber as far as his future in that option?
Yeah, listen, we've had some very basic conversations with Corey and his agent, BB Abbott. I don't see us picking up the option. But depending upon, a number of factors, not the least of which is how his rehab goes. We had interest in bringing him in last year for a reason, and having gotten around him for whatever it was, 6 or 8 months, probably only enhanced that. So he's certainly a possibility that we could bring back. We haven't engaged fully yet, just because we want to see how the rehab plays out.
And as for Lance, we know he was in trade, and I'm assuming that some of that could be re-engaged. And talk about that, and then tell me what you thought about what Jordan and Kyle did for you.
Yeah, I thought both guys had moments. I think both guys are capable of a lot more. And it's going to be a little bit of a question as we sit down going into the winter of, where are Kyle Cody, John King, Colby Allard, Joe Palumbo, Wes Benjamin on down the line. Like, where are those guys? What are they prepared for? How many kind of traditional starters will we ultimately have in the rotation versus some spots where maybe we can get a little more creative and figure things out. Kyle, I thought 2 of his last 3 starts were certainly a step in the right direction. I thought he was open to some suggestions from the coaching staff, but there clearly areas for improvement. I mean, he loved having the guy on the club. I thought early in the year, as we were dealing with a lot of real world, real life issues, I thought he was maybe the leader on the team, and really I thought helped a lot of the individuals around us. But from a performance standpoint, I think he'd be the first to say that he can be better there. And Jordan's similar, although not as many, not as consistent with some of those bright spots. Jordan's stuff is plenty to compete and win at the big league level. It's kind of consistency and execution.
Last thing I have for you, free agency, obviously you guys are not going to be on the top level of that, but how do you view, like you talked about the financial reality for everybody this year, and I think there's already been a deal or two where there's people who took pay cuts. How do you view the market, and what do you think is going to happen this year? How different is it going to be?
I'm going to let that play out. Okay, I'd rather speak to, our plans ourselves than kind of the market as a whole.
All right, man. Thanks.
Okay, we have a couple of follow-ups. T.R. Sullivan.
John, left field, how do you view that position? Not necessarily as far as personnel, as far as, does that need to be an offensive position? Do you need to find the offensive help you need for left field?
It's definitely an area that we could, we could slot a bat in there. I mean, depending upon what happens in center field, I think Leote's got to continue to compete there. Eli White, Heineman, other guys will compete, but if Leote, continues on the trajectory he was on and ultimately holds that spot down, I think you got some guys in competition there, in Eli White and Scott Heineman and Solak, potentially Adolis Garcia, potentially Willie Calhoun. I mean, we've encouraged Willie to not just accept being a DH at this point in his career. And not to give up on that side of it. But clearly we need more offensively from left field and a number of other spots as well.
The guy you've not mentioned, and nobody's mentioned him, is Danny Santana. What is his situation within the organization? I believe he's still arbitration eligible, correct?
He is, yeah. He's got another year of arbitration eligibility. He's here rehabbing. Saw him at TMI last week. we haven't addressed that with them yet. I kind of need to get a better handle on the exact timeline of when he might be ready, and then that'll dictate what we do there.
Question is, does Solak need one position to help his offensive potential, or how do you do that?
Kind of view Nick as, and I know you asked Woody that too, I think last week of the year, but I kind of view Nick as one of these guys that I think is mentally strong enough to handle, playing different spots, and that may ultimately be the role that he has to fill on the club. I think he was a little unlucky this year, but I also think that he can get better than he was this year. We've got to make a call first and foremost, I think, at second base, and does he compete for and ultimately win that job? And then if not, where do we go from there? But listen, we're not going to guarantee a lot of sitting here a day after the season or 2 days after the season. We're not going to guarantee a lot of spots, but he's in a pretty good spot to make the club, given how hard he works and his mindset. It's just a matter of what's the best fit for him and what else we do this winter.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else, DR?
No, thank you very much.
And we'll go to Evan if we get time for one or two more after that, if anybody's got them. So go ahead, Evan.
John, I know that we tend to look at things in black and white, and you have to look at them in shades of gray, but off of what TR asked is where I was going. It still seems to me, from my perspective, like you've got to make a determination about your middle infield before you can make any other kinds of plans. Does Solak get a chance at second base? And if he does get a chance at second base, what does that mean for Odor? Do you want to look at Kiner-Falefa at shortstop, and what does that mean for Elvis? Do you feel like you've got to sort out the infield situation before spring training comes around?
I think we'll have a lot more information by then. I can't sit here right now and say for sure that we'll have a decision made before we get to camp. I think more likely, it'll be a competition. But, it's the other thing. We've also talked to, Elvis and Odor about, they may need to play other spots depending upon how those situations unfold. And, does Odor play left field? Does he play some third base? We think he's athletic enough to do those things, but we're not there yet. I'm more throwing out like potential options than how we're leaning at this point. To your point on does it have to get settled before spring training? It may, but I couldn't say that right now.
And you may not be able to answer this one, but there is that significant financial commitment to both of those players. Have you gotten any guidance from ownership as to whether or not they view this as a sunk cost, or how would that is it not possible to walk away from those guys or one of those guys if you so chose?
Yeah, I don't think that we're going to need to go down that path. If we ultimately do, and we'll make a recommendation at that point, but I don't think we're going to need to. And Ray has been nothing but supportive. I haven't had that conversation with him at this point.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, looks like the last one is from Jeff Lowe.
John, just want to say hi to Chris. I know I was under this one question. I hope he's doing well. When John, you mentioned the number 2 pick in the draft. I guess a lot of questions can be asked. How does not having a college or high school season last season impact your preparations for that? And then number 2, how do you feel about your draft history the past 5 to 8 years? It's misses, etc.
Yeah, I think there were a few years prior to 2018 where, the record is what it is, where there were some years that we had some production middle to later in the draft, but we had some misses at the top. And I think that still is to be written too. I mean, I still think that Bubba Thompson or Chris Cease or Hans Kraus or these guys could change that perspective very quickly with a year or two of success. But I get where we're at and how it looks at this point. I think for the 18, 19, and 20 drafts, with the Cole Winn, Josh Young, and Justin Foskey drafts, I think they're going to be a lot of productive big leaguers that come out of there. I feel really good about the talent. Kind of reviewed it recently, and some of these things take time. We didn't play a minor league season this year, so it's like you don't have the ability to point to anything recently to demonstrate this group's development. But we made some pretty intentional and clear changes in our process and how we went about things about 3 years ago, and I'm of the mindset that those have taken and that that'll be proven out over time. To the first part of your question about the having the 2 pick in the country, I mean, I think a lot of it's going to depend on what does college baseball do and high school baseball. What are they able to do in the spring? I think right now there's a lot going on in the amateur baseball world. I mean, our scouts are pretty active. They're able to, we didn't get the summer looks that you'd want to get, a few of them, but not the traditional summer looks. But I think we're going to get a pretty good fall season as far as scrimmages and workouts and things like that. And then if these programs are able to have baseball in the spring, which I think we're all hopeful for, I think we'll be in a good spot. I really do. I think our guys did a lot of legwork. Some of the guys that were in college, the top picks in college, we've known since they were 14, 15 years old. So, I think we'll be in a good spot. But it's obviously stating the obvious. It's a big piece of it that amateur baseball is able to play this spring.
Do you need to draft a college guy? Do you need to go the safe route, or is there a Bobby Wood Jr. out there that you feel like would be a safe bet?
I think, it's just one of those things, man. If some years are, the top picks and the top 2 picks in the country are Josh Beckett and Adrian Gonzalez out of high school, and like if you would have wanted to go safe there and go college, like you would have looked pretty silly. So I think it's got to be about the best player available. There is some value in, certainly in college guys, they're closer. There's more of a track record. Some of the injury attrition risk has already passed. They've already passed some of those tests. So definitely cognizant of that. But man, you'd hate to look back and say we passed on, whoever, whatever like top high school pick that there've been over the years to kind of satisfy that.
Okay, thank you.